What if I told you the world's greatest trickster wasn't a human, but an 8-legged spider? Prepare to have your mind spun like a web as we dive deep into the hilarious and surprisingly wise world of Anansi, the legendary West African folktale character. You'll never look at spiders the same way again. Forget everything you think you know about heroes and villains. Today we're unearthing a tale so old, so cunning, and so utterly captivating, it's been passed down through generations across continents and centuries. Get ready to laugh, think, and maybe even learn a few tricks as we unravel the enduring magic of Anansi, the original master of mischief. Long before superhero franchises dominated our screens and before Greek gods battled on Mount Olympus in popular imagination, there existed a character so compelling, so brilliantly crafted, that he survived the most horrific journey in human history and emerged on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean still making people laugh, still teaching lessons, and still outsmarting creatures far more powerful than himself. This character is Anansi, and his story is one that deserves to echo through the ages with the same vigor and vitality it has carried for millennia. Anansi originates from the Akan people of what is now modern-day Ghana in West Africa. His name derives from the word for spider in the Akan language, and depending on which story you encounter, he might appear as a spider, a man, or most intriguingly, as a Spider-Man hybrid who can shift between forms as easily as he shifts between schemes. This shape-shifting quality itself tells us something profound about Anansi's nature because he represents adaptability, survival, and the power of intelligence over brute strength. In a world where lions roar, elephants trumpet, and leopards prowl with deadly grace, the spider seems like the least likely hero. Yet Anansi doesn't just survive in this world. He thrives, and he does so by using the one weapon no creature can match when wielded with true cunning, his mind. The tales of Anansi are countless, each one a masterclass in storytelling, humor, and subtle wisdom. Perhaps the most famous of all Anansi stories is the tale of how he acquired all the world's stories from Nyame, the Sky God. In this foundational narrative, Anansi approaches the great Sky God and asks to purchase all the stories in the world. Nyame, amused by the audacity of this tiny spider, agrees but sets what he believes to be an impossible price. Anansi must bring him 4 things: Python, the serpent of enormous length and strength; Leopard, with his razor-sharp claws and teeth; a swarm of hornets whose stings could kill a man; and a fairy whom no one had ever captured. These were creatures of legend, beings of power that even the mightiest warriors feared to confront. Nyame was certain that Anansi would fail, and in failing would never bother him again. But here's where Anansi's genius truly shines. He doesn't attempt to overpower any of these creatures. Instead, he uses psychology, manipulation, and an understanding of pride and vanity that would make modern psychologists nod in appreciation. For Python, Anansi engages in a conversation about length, suggesting that Python might not actually be as long as a particular palm branch. Python, proud and vain, insists on being measured against the branch to prove his superiority. Anansi helpfully suggests Python stretch out along the branch to ensure accuracy, and as Python does so, Anansi quickly binds him to it. One impossible task completed through nothing more than clever conversation and an understanding of ego. For Leopard, Anansi digs a deep pit and covers it with branches and leaves. He then tricks Leopard into falling in by appealing to his hunting instincts, perhaps mentioning prey nearby or simply waiting for Leopard to pass by. Once trapped, Leopard is at Anansi's mercy. The fairy is captured through flattery and trickery, with Anansi creating a tar baby or sticky figure that the fairy becomes stuck to while investigating it. And the hornets? Anansi's solution is perhaps the most brilliant of all. He hovers near the hornet's nest with a gourd and some water, splashing a bit of water on the nest while simultaneously splashing water on himself. He then tells the confused hornets that it's raining and that they should all take shelter in his gourd to stay dry. The hornets, grateful for his concern and fooled by his act, fly into the gourd, whereupon Anansi quickly seals it shut. When Anansi returns to Nyame with all 4 impossible prizes, the Sky God has no choice but to honor his word. From that day forward, all stories belong to Anansi, and that's why even today these tales are often called spider stories, or Anansi stories in West African tradition. This origin story isn't just entertaining, it's a profound statement about the power of narrative itself. In capturing the stories, Anansi captures something more valuable than gold or jewels. He captures the means by which culture is transmitted, lessons are taught, and identity is preserved. Stories are how we make sense of the world, how we teach our children, how we remember our past and imagine our future. By making Anansi the keeper of stories, these tales acknowledge the revolutionary power of narrative and the trickster figure who embodies adaptability and survival against all odds. But Anansi's adventures don't end there. In fact, they're just beginning. Across hundreds of tales, Anansi continues to demonstrate that intelligence and creativity can overcome any obstacle, though not without consequences. This is crucial to understanding why Anansi endures as a character, because he isn't a simple hero in the traditional sense. He's flawed, sometimes deeply so. His greed gets him into trouble. His schemes occasionally backfire spectacularly. He cheats his own family, lies to his friends, and manipulates everyone around him. Yet we continue to root for him, continue to laugh at his antics, and continue to learn from his mistakes. In one famous story, Anansi's greed leads him to try to keep all the wisdom in the world for himself. He collects wisdom from everywhere, storing it in a large pot. His plan is to hide this pot at the top of a tall tree where no one else can reach it. As he climbs, carrying the pot in front of him, he struggles because the pot keeps getting in his way. His young son, watching from below, suggests that it would be easier if Anansi tied the pot to his back instead. Anansi realizes his son is right, which leads to a profound revelation. If his young son has wisdom that Anansi doesn't possess, then clearly Anansi doesn't have all the wisdom in the world in his pot. In frustration, or perhaps in an enlightened moment, Anansi throws the pot down, and it shatters, scattering wisdom throughout the world. This is why the story tells us, wisdom is found everywhere in every person, and why no one can claim to possess all of it. The lesson resonates across cultures and time periods. Hoarding knowledge benefits no one, and wisdom comes from unexpected sources. Another tale finds Anansi's greed manifesting during a time of famine. When his family is starving, Anansi discovers a magical field where crops grow abundantly. Instead of sharing this discovery with his wife and children, he sneaks off each day to eat his fill, returning home to complain about his own hunger. His family grows weaker while Anansi grows plumper. Eventually, his son follows him and discovers the truth. The shame Anansi feels when confronted by his son's hurt and disappointment is palpable, and depending on the version of the story, Anansi faces various consequences for his selfishness. These stories don't shy away from showing Anansi's moral failings, and that's part of their genius. They teach lessons not through perfect heroes we can never emulate, but through flawed characters whose mistakes mirror our own. The psychological sophistication of Anansi tales is remarkable when you consider their ancient origins. These stories understand human nature with an acuity that feels modern. They explore themes of jealousy, ambition, family loyalty, the corrupting influence of power, the importance of community, and the double-edged nature of cleverness. Anansi is often punished for his schemes, not through divine intervention necessarily, but through the natural consequences of his actions. When he lies, people stop trusting him. When he cheats, he ends up isolated. When he's greedy, he loses what matters most. These are sophisticated moral lessons delivered with humor and entertainment, making them far more effective than straightforward lectures could ever be. Now, here's where Anansi's story becomes even more remarkable and touches on one of the darkest chapters in human history. When millions of enslaved Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic Ocean during the horrific period of the transatlantic slave trade, they carried little with them. Their possessions, their homes, their freedom, all were stripped away. But they carried something that couldn't be shackled: their stories, their culture, their identity. Anansi made that terrible journey too, surviving in the memories and voices of people who needed him perhaps more than ever. In the Caribbean, in parts of South America, and in certain regions of the southern United States, Anansi's stories took root in new soil. They adapted, evolved, and continued to serve their essential purposes. Entertainment, yes, but also covert resistance, coded communication, and cultural preservation in the face of systems designed to erase identity. In Jamaica, Anansi became so deeply embedded in the culture that the word Anansi came to mean both spider and story. Tell me in Anansi means tell me a story. This linguistic evolution demonstrates how thoroughly integrated these tales became in Caribbean culture. Anansi stories in the Caribbean often took on new dimensions, with the trickster spider outwitting not just animals and gods, but also plantation owners, overseers, and other figures of oppressive authority. The subversive nature of these stories was thinly veiled, and their message was clear. The powerful can be outwitted, the system can be beaten, and intelligence and cunning are weapons more potent than physical strength. For enslaved people denied education, denied autonomy, denied their humanity, Anansi stories were revolutionary acts of cultural resistance disguised as children's entertainment. The influence of Anansi extends far beyond traditional storytelling. Scholars and folklorists have traced his influence through African American folktales, seeing his DNA in characters like Br'er Rabbit, who uses similar tactics of cunning and trickery to survive and thrive despite being small and seemingly powerless. The structure of Anansi stories, with their emphasis on clever dialogue, unexpected twists, and moral lessons, influenced narrative traditions throughout the African diaspora. In contemporary culture, Anansi has experienced something of a renaissance. Neil Gaiman featured him prominently in American Gods, introducing the character to new audiences. Comics, novels, and even video games have drawn on Anansi's rich mythology. The character has proven endlessly adaptable, which is fitting for a figure whose defining characteristic is adaptation itself. But what makes Anansi truly timeless isn't just his cleverness or his humor, it's what he represents on a deeper, almost archetypal level. Anansi embodies the triumph of wit over power, the victory of the small over the large, the success of the marginalized against the privileged. In every culture and every era, people face situations where they feel powerless, where brute force isn't an option, where the system seems rigged against them. Anansi provides a different model for success. He shows that careful observation, creative thinking, understanding psychology, and sometimes just sheer audacity can change outcomes that seem predetermined. He's a figure of hope disguised as a trickster, a teacher pretending to be a fool, a revolutionary wearing the mask of an entertainer. The humor in Anansi's stories serves multiple functions beyond entertainment. Laughter creates community. When we laugh together, we bond, we lower our defenses, we become more receptive to ideas. The comedy in these tales makes them memorable, ensuring they'll be retold, passed down, kept alive. But the humor also provides distance that allows serious topics to be explored safely. When Anansi tricks someone, we laugh, but we're also learning about the techniques of persuasion and manipulation. When his schemes backfire, we laugh, but we're absorbing lessons about hubris, greed, and the importance of considering consequences. The laughter is the sugar that helps the medicine go down, making wisdom digestible and memorable. Modern audiences continue to need Anansi's lessons. In an age of corporate power, digital manipulation, fake news, and systems that often seem designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many, Anansi's tactics of seeing through deception, understanding motivations, thinking creatively, and refusing to accept that power structures are immutable feel more relevant than ever. His stories remind us that the apparently powerless are never truly without agency, that intelligence and creativity are forms of power, and that the status quo is always vulnerable to those clever and brave enough to challenge it. As our journey through Anansi's web comes to its close, we realize that this isn't really an ending at all. Anansi's stories don't end. They continue, evolving with each telling, adapting to new contexts, finding new audiences, and remaining perpetually relevant. That's the magic of truly great folklore. It doesn't belong to one time or place but to the universal human experience. Anansi speaks to something fundamental in us, the part that roots for the underdog, that delights in clever solutions, that refuses to believe that might makes right, and that understands survival sometimes requires cunning. If you've enjoyed unraveling these tales with me today, if Anansi's web of stories has caught your imagination, then please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or perhaps your own favorite trickster tale from your culture, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future explorations of folklore, mythology, and the stories that shape our world. Your engagement helps keep these ancient stories alive for new generations, just as countless storytellers have kept Anansi alive across centuries and oceans. The next time you see a spider spinning its web, perhaps you'll think of Anansi and smile, remembering that the smallest creatures can weave the most intricate designs, that intelligence outmatches strength, and that stories, those gossamer threads connecting past to present, might be the most powerful magic of all. Anansi's laughter continues to echo through time, reminding us that wisdom wears many faces, heroes come in unexpected forms, and sometimes the greatest power lies not in having all the answers, but in asking the right questions and being clever enough to recognize opportunity when it presents itself. The web is vast, the stories are infinite, and Anansi, that eight-legged master of mischief, continues to teach, entertain, and inspire everyone willing to listen to his timeless tales.